Hi, Vahe. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Actually, I'm thrilled that you're joining me on this program of mindful leaders and inherited legacies. Vahe, you have had a very public professional career. You're a painter, you're an author, you're a playwright, you're a director, an actor. I mean, you name it, everything in the arts and the literature sector, you've got it. And with all your talents, you've always taken us into another dimension or another world. What I mean by this is that you help awaken our spirits and our self-awareness through everything that you do. With this program, my goal is to better understand the internal compass of the individual, of the person. So it's not so much about their professional careers, but more about their life journey, more about how their journeys have impacted their profession. So given that we speak about mindful leaders, I would like to start with a question related to the term leadership or leaders. In my personal opinion, Vahe, a leader is a person who is able to help others find their own potential. It's not about the position in a ladder of a corporate only or an executive, but it's also about a person who helps stir something special in others, helps others find their gift or their talents, if you will. I think you've got that kind of magic. So tell me what you or how you define and understand the term leader or leadership.
I think your definition of a leader was pretty dead on. I don't know if I can add anything to it. But in general, I can say one thing, that I did not set out to be a leader, or I do not consider myself a leader at all, at all. I consider myself, first and foremost, an entertainer. And by that, and it's a very broad term, an entertainer, but basically, I am a storyteller. I am a storyteller. And if with my stories, I take you somewhere, I lead you somewhere, then I am the happiest human being on earth. But that, basically, that's what it is. I lead you with my stories. And I say this because I think in anything that I do, even if what I'm doing is very abstract, like what my paintings, I am still telling a story, and because I think telling a story is the most basic form of art. It is the most basic form. Everything we do has a narrative, should have a narrative. If it doesn't, then it becomes boring. It becomes completely futile. This is my point of view.
No, you point something out. I think we're all storytellers, right? But the way you actually tell the story to impact and move somebody in a way, that's not something that everybody can do. And I think you have that talent that is very unique. It's not just in your monologues, it's not just in your paintings, but it's also in your novels, right? So that's a gift, I think. But looking at your life, you're a very public figure. You're always in a position of publicity, and that means you're also putting yourself in a position of vulnerability, because as a publicly visible person, you're open to all types of comments and criticisms, sometimes even hurtful and even malicious ones. Tell me, how do you manage these reactions, and what is the philosophy you live by to stay true to yourself despite these criticisms? It's very difficult to do.
It is very difficult. And I should say that I have been, honestly, I have been lucky, because as vulnerable as I have been in my positions and in my life, I think I have been appreciated enough to dodge some serious attacks. That relates to even during my early years when I was doing theater and monologues and stuff, I think, I don't know, I have gotten away with a lot, as far as what I say, as far as the language that I use, as far as touching some, very touchy subjects. I think I have gotten away with a lot of shit, so I shouldn't complain. But I think the main idea is that whatever you do, if you do it with good intentions, if you do it with compassion and love, without an agenda, I think you're able to touch a lot of people.
I firmly agree with you. I think intention is key, and how you start off even just the day with a good intention could lead to.
And you have to love what you do, and you have to love your audience. You have to love the people who are watching you, people who are listening to you. You have to feel a certain love for them in order to be able to communicate with them and make them realize that, you don't have an agenda here. You're just saying, you're speaking your mind, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, but you've been very fortunate to know what your passion is from a very young age, even your rebellious teenage years. Lots of people actually live their years, the rest of their life, not even knowing what that is. How do you help people understand to find their passion? And I use the word passion and not the word calling. I feel that calling is, I've mentioned this before in other programs, I feel calling is very rooted in the function and the role of the position. But no, the passion is, it leads you everywhere. How did you know that from a very young age that this is your passion? Did people encourage you? Did they point this out to you?
I think I did. Okay, I can start from very early on because I realized this, that my need to entertain came from a very young age, and probably because I was a very fragile kid. I was a very, very fragile kid. I mean, anybody could beat me up, anybody. And and when you live in a city like Beirut, in an environment where bullying is so common, and you can be the butt of a joke so easily that you have to have some kind of a defense. And my defense was entertaining. My defense was humor. My defense was my stories. And so what I realized very early on, that if I can entertain, I can make them stay out of trouble, or at least I can stop some kind of intimidation. So very early on, I became the sort of the life of the party, like I
telling stories.
Stories, entertaining and so on. People liked to have me around because I was a jokester. I was making fun of everything. I was cracking jokes left and right. And so that was my defense. And I think in time, I started taking it more and more seriously. And I realized something, that no matter what you're saying, if you're saying it with a certain humor and a certain flair of entertainment, it will reach somewhere. Let me explain this. For example, I have had teachers in schools and universities where they would be the most respected, the most knowledgeable people, and yet I didn't learn much from them because they put me to sleep. They talked and it made sense, but I couldn't follow because I was bored. But I had teachers who didn't know as much, but they were so entertaining that I listened to them with all my, attention, and I learned more from these guys than from the ones who were serious. Absolutely. And this applies to everything. I have said this over and over again, especially in our culture, in Armenian culture. We tend to believe that anything that is heavy-handed, anything that's serious, is more important than anything that's, that's said in a lighter manner, in a more humorous manner. And that's such a sad thing to believe, because Dostoevsky wrote with a language that was fit for grocery store clerks and stuff, but he was a fantastic storyteller, and he made a lot of sense so anyway, I don't want to go off with that.
There's a point I wanted to raise about you mentioning how I think especially in your field and your profession, I think we're accustomed to hearing caregivers or parents or family members saying, why go into acting or writing or even or even music? You're not going to amount to anything. You should go into something more serious. But you actually you were stubborn enough to continue despite these. I would call it noise for you, but other people would call it, instructions or requirements, or even just words of encouragement. You're not going to amount to anything in this area. Follow my lead. This will get you to success. But you didn't. You went your own way. You felt that this was important for you, and you were true to yourself, I find, from the very young age.
Yes.
I think there's one thing I want to turn to, and that for me is a very important part of your story, and that's your family story, Vahe. I think, and this leads to also who you become later on in life, but your entire family, your grandparents, all of them are all survivors of the genocide. And I'm not trying to bring this topic up because it's a sad story. I think it's something that is important for us to raise. The story of your father's parents is one that I want to raise specifically today because it's touching. It's been touching for you as well. Your father's parents are for the record, from the region of Agan in the village. They come from a village called Zak. So during the genocide of 1915, your father's father, Vahe Berberian, is already taken by the Ottoman Turks, and he's not to be heard of again. His wife, your grandmother, Maryam, she's left with her own mother and her 3 young children, her 2 daughters, who are 6 and 8 years old, and her baby boy, who's only 1 year old, who happens to be your father, Rafi, right?
Yes.
So far, so good. So they're part of the forced marches until a friend or a relative sends someone by the name of Guchuk Agha to save them and hides them in a remote village with a Turkish family for several months. And after several months, your great-grandmother hears that there are Armenians still living and surviving in Malatya. So she takes the 2 little girls, the 6 and 8-year-old, your aunts, and goes to look for the Armenians and never to return again. So your grandmother, Maryam, alone with her baby boy, they undergo famine, poverty, all by themselves. They reach Aleppo, and your grandmother gives your father to an Armenian orphanage, right? She must be in her 20s at this point, or late 20s, early 30s. So she undergoes this. But the reason why I want to point this out, and I'm trying to summarize the story, is because you grew up with these stories on her lap since the age of 2, 3, 4. And here's little Vahe on the lap of Maryam, who lost everybody, her husband, her brothers, her mother, her 2 little girls, right? The only surviving child is her boy. your father. And here every day, every night, she's telling you these stories, right? These stories about how she lost her girls. They must be found somewhere. They must have been taken somewhere. They're horrifying stories. So I'm just curious to know, how do you feel that your artwork, your novels, your profession have been influenced by these horrifying narratives told by your grandmother from very early age?
Lara, first off, I love you for not making me tell this story and you doing it yourself. Thank you, really.
It's difficult to hear, right? When somebody else tells the story.
Yes, and thank you, really, honestly, I'm saying this, yeah. Anyway, so it is, look, when you're 4 or 5 years old or 6, 7, whatever, and your grandmother, you're sitting with your grandmother, or you're walking with your grandmother, your hand in her hand, and she's telling you how 3 times during the deportations, 3 times, she took her 1-year-old kid, Rafi, my father, to the Euphrates River to throw him in the river because she didn't want to see him suffer. And all 3 times, she didn't have the heart to do it, and she had to come back. And, she's telling you this story, crying, and at one point she's saying, even if I had thrown the baby in the river, I don't think he would have drowned, because the river was so full of dead bodies, that I thought, he would suffer and he wouldn't drown easily. So anyway, you hear this type of story about her daughters being taken away and so on and so forth, and it does an immeasurable, it creates a dent in your psyche that it stays with you forever. And I don't know, I honestly don't think that I would have preferred for her not to tell these things, so that my psyche, would not be damaged, or so that she would spare my emotional, well-being. I'm glad that she has told me all this. And I have a hard time with parents who spare their kids from certain truths because they want to spare them the pain, So did it have an impact? Of course it had an impact. And for years, when I was growing up, but then again, the whole culture was that there was a necrophilia culture that we grew up with. In our homes, the calendars that we were hanging were full of skulls and bones and pictures of genocide, and so it stays with you. It stays with you, and maybe my need to find comedy, my need to find humor, comes from that. I don't know. It comes from because I am not a happy person. Let's face it. This is why I go through severe anxiety and depression. I go through bouts of depression, and I think if I was happy, I wouldn't look for humor. I would just live my life, But because of where I am emotionally most of the time, I feel like I have to find humor in everything in order to make my life more bearable, in order to continue living, because the only thing that sort of creates a balance in life is to find that humorous part. Because I believe that life, in theater, you have comedy and tragedy, the two masks. And I think they come together, and they should be inseparable. If I am writing a play, I should have both comedy and tragedy, because that's what life is. So I have a hard time with people who completely eliminate the comedy and dwell on the tragedy. And also I have a hard time with people who think, oh, life is always, fun and games and so on, and completely ignore the tragic part.
It's probably not that they're ignoring it, it's their way of suppressing it. In many cases, they suppress it, they don't realize they can actually make use of that sadness or that tragedy for something that would come to the surface that would be more interesting. In your case, it's your artwork, it's your novel, it's your storytelling, it's everything that comes with it.
Or maybe they're insensitive, completely insensitive. I remember, I think I read years ago, there was an old article with Tennessee Williams. I think the interview, it was an interview in the late 60s. And the interviewer had asked, what is the secret of happiness? And Tennessee Williams said, insensitivity.
It's listening to you, I keep thinking about your childhood again, because it's a novel in itself. Everything about your childhood was connected to the Armenian nation. I'm thinking about your father mostly because he was usually absent from home because he was busy, with nation-related affairs, meetings, building libraries, the, Hamaskayan issues, the dance group, you name it. Everything was about, or church, So you were always surrounded by these concepts and values such as religion or Christianity, nationalism, patriotism, or genocide-related anger and frustration. It's as though, I think you mentioned this before, that the genocide never seems to have ended, right? But in your 40s, Vahe, or maybe sooner, this is something that you can clarify, but in your 40s, I believe you realize that you can no longer live, with hatred and an anger, and this rage or this victim mentality. Walk me through the philosophy that you start to live by, just from that point on.
I think...
you mentioned, sorry, I'm probably going to just jump in here. You mentioned humor, right? Humor was obviously one of the most important ways to help you through the years, and to come across or to, overcome this victim mentality. Certain concepts for you became probably overrated because, this is how you grew as an individual, spiritually, emotionally, and physically as well. But, you also mentioned something about what happiness is for you. Tell me, how did you find that? We touched upon that earlier, but more or less in this realm.
In my teens, I was 17 years old when I left home, and I became a hippie, and I lived in communes, and it was my attempt to escape all this. It's really, really, it had gotten to a point where I wanted to experience the world, and my world was too narrow, was too claustrophobic for me, especially at a time where the world was going through so much changes. There was the counterculture movement, there were the music, the peace and love, the whole atmosphere of the hippies and so on and so forth. So I wanted to experience that. And I left home. When I left home, I was like, I want my freedom, and I want to be the citizen of the world, and so on and so forth. So I lived that, and I soon realized that nationality is like, like shoes. If everyone chooses to walk around barefoot, I'll be very happy to walk around barefoot. But if we have to wear shoes, I want my own shoes. I am more comfortable in my own shoes, And so I think when I went back to Beirut, I was a little different person, and also the war in Beirut. It was a wake-up call to everyone. All of a sudden, here you are, like months ago, you were a flower child, and then all of a sudden, 3 months later, you're carrying a gun. It was such a horrible juxtaposition psychologically for me. But throughout the years, I realized that in order to live a blissful life, and I hate to use the word blissful, but I don't know what else to use. You have to sort of be able to sift out the anger in you. The anger, yes. And I have done my best, because anger is something you feel for the mistake of someone else. You know, a mistake that someone else has made, and all of a sudden you feel anger and you're poisoning yourself. Okay, so if I am full of anger, that means that the Turks not only were successful to do so much like physical damage, but also emotionally scar me to the point where I am poisoning myself.
If your grandparents were alive today, what would be the one word they would say about you and the legacy that you're leaving to us with your artwork, with your artistry, with your literature?
I think my father would be proud, even though I have never ever seen him proud of me. I don't. Or if he was, he never showed it. And I think it's the same with my mom. My mom is always apologetic about me because of my beliefs, and because she's such a devout Christian that anything I do is like, sometimes I ask her, what was the name of this guy in the Bible who was punished by God? And so she goes, I will tell you, but I know you will use it in a context that's not gonna appeal to me. But I think my ancestors would be proud.
I think so too. I know so. It feels that way. So definitely, we never really know everything about our ancestors. We feel certain things from them. We even things that are unsaid or not told to us, we can feel it, sense it, but it's not always the case. It's our distortion. It's our distorted understanding of what they think and feel. But I think you've accomplished so much. You have so many different. You have such a variety of talents, Vahe, and through each of these talents and these gifts, you're able to give to us such wise messages about life in general. So regardless of the shoe that you're wearing, I think that you are a beautiful human being. And I really am looking forward to reading this book. And I'm very thankful that you took this time to be with me, to share me your personal story, Vahe. It was gorgeous.
I'm the one who should be thankful, Okis. Seriously. Yeah, I love you so much.
I love you too. Thank you, Vahe, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.